Hello there, this is Critical from Critical Media, just taking a look at the 2023 release of the Star Wars The New Republic Omnibus, Volume 1. Yes, as you can see by the stripe, it is Legends material, and what we usually do at this channel is give you an idea of what to expect if you ever come across these books in the wild. So we go over the exterior, some bonus material, art and plot points, and then a brief review at the end. Now, before jumping in, I've mentioned this before, how from the 90s up until like the mid 2000s when I really got back into comics, the only kind of comic books I was reading were Star Wars related. And yes, thankfully there were really strong releases from Dark Horse, and this was no exception. This particularly collects that Mara Jade, the Emperor's Hand story, a little bit of the Shadows of the Empire ending, basically the epilogue, and the amazing Rogue Squadron series, which for any Star Wars fan, it's basically a Bible of the world of Star Wars. It explains so much. But anywho, just getting back into the nature of this channel. In terms of the exterior, yeah, I did opt for the DM variant in this case. So yeah, just because, yeah, the ships of Star Wars were always my original draw to the series, to the medium. But yeah, very consistent, I'd say, in its design. Very similar to how the other Legends book, like the Empire, has different coloring to its lettering for Star Wars. Just unique in that sense. And very consistent with the other release, very much borrowing from the Epic Collection's designs as well. So, definitely appreciate that. Now, underneath the dust jacket, yeah, we do get a wraparound image. I do wish they kind of cropped it a little bit better, though. As you can kind of see, not either side doesn't really get enough love. So yeah, you just get a partial of the X-Wing, it wraps onto the spine, and then, yeah, just a few TIE fighters chasing in this dogfight. So, I don't know, I wish they kind of cropped it a little bit better, that's just my opinion. In terms of the book and its yeah, it is a 1,300 pager, so it's quite significant in this case. I have to big up Marvel lately for coming out with some bigger ones. I think they've been getting a lot of flack for releasing those short omnis. So definitely appreciate that this one's, one of the bigger boys out there. Now, in terms of bonus material, again, it seems like they did just the right amount. Now, if you had the Epic Collection of, well, a few of them, but like Dark Empire, for instance, yes, it does reuse the X-Wing Rogue Squadron handbook here, which basically just includes a lot of character profiles. So yeah, oh yeah, always love these two. But anywho, oh yeah, good old Cap. Man, Leonia Tavira, jeez. But anywho, aside from these awesome factoids, which, yeah, I used to live for stuff like this. Yeah, just some diagnostics from the handbook, the vehicle handbook. But, oh yeah, there's Sunter Fel, one of the best antagonists ever. But yeah, just some cover designs here. Surprising interviews from Stan Sakai, the same guy who did Usagi Yojimbo. Yeah, you got Tim Zahn in here as well. Awesome stuff. Some more cover art, but you also get a little bit of Doug Wheatley as well. Doug Wheatley, for Star Wars fans, at least Star Wars comics fans, yeah, he's a pretty big deal when it comes to a lot of the series. Yeah, there he is here. Awesome stuff. So, anywho, it seems as though this is Legends material. Maybe it's best to show you just the table of contents here. By the way, one small thing, I've never understood why, but for whatever reason in the Indicia, Marvel almost never gives any sort of praise to Dark Horse. Don't get me wrong, they give praise to the creators, but you kind of have to give your hat in hand for Dark Horse. After all, they did assemble the talent that helped create this. That's just my 2 cents on it. But yeah, I will appreciate that Marvel, one thing they have been doing exceptionally well with these Legends Omnis is they are mapping them exceptionally well. So they don't necessarily come out in publication order. It comes out in order of the flow of the story. So definitely appreciate that. Now, yeah, as you can kind of see here, yes, it does start off with the Mara Jade Emperor's Hand story. It almost starts off like one of those DC beginnings where they almost retell the origin of the character at the beginning. But yeah, basically about Emperor's Hand, Mara Jade, basically his like contract killer, his contract get anything done person. Basically, she rivaled Darth Vader in importance for the Emperor, like in terms of getting his, his agendas all taken care of. But yeah, always found that this series was always on point. Consistent art throughout, so always appreciative whenever they keep one artist on a series. Now, here comes the Shadows of the Empire story. Now, this isn't so much the Shadows of the Empire story itself, but more so its epilogue. So they call it Shadows of the Empire Evolution. And it really focuses on Guri, who is Shizor's bodyguard during that series. Or should I say that android or whatever. I've always forgot how they explained it. Reading it again, she's basically an android. But admittedly, as good as the story was, or a nice sampling, it's okay, but I pretty much only like this story because of its ending. For those of you who beat the video game on hard mode, let's say, or read the story, you know what really happened at the end of the book, or end of the story, so you kind of know what I'm referring to, even at the end of this comic. Ironically, it does something similar, so always appreciate that. Now, they do sprinkle in some Star Wars tales in between each kind of major series. Once again, it's done more so for the chronological effect. But one thing I definitely appreciated, and this is amazing how I thought of this like when this book came out. This is from this little story here that you're looking at is from Star Wars Tales. It's called Lucky. Basically explains like Wedge Antilles' like motivations for joining the rebellion. But I remember when I read this came out in like the mid 2000s. I always thought this would have been so perfect for the Rogue Squadron series. Wouldn't you know it? Marvel literally maps it just before Rogue Squadron. Perfect. Because, Rogue Squadron overall, Wedge Antilles, he's more badass than he ever is in any other book. Like, this is where he gets to shine. So it made sense that they kind of arranged everything for him. So yeah, Rogue Squadron itself, the series, it plays a lot like one of those like World War II comics, like Sergeant Fury, or, what's it called? Like the Hellhounds, or, all the other ones out there, like the Losers and whatever. So it actually is very serious with its wartime prose. So yeah, you have Loro and Groznik, basically the Han Solo and Chewbacca, but more so mercenaries, like resistance fighters. But their dynamic is very similar. I always appreciated that fact. So very on point. The incredible, almost, infectious and affable Taiko Selchu. He's basically the one character from this series that everybody would probably end up loving. Like, this character was made from this series, I tell you. But one of the better pilots of Rogue Squadron, that's for sure. I mean, Cap and all of them are awesome too. Personally, Plor was always one of my favorites. But anywho, you're kind of seeing that typical 90s art though. Like, it's strong, it has a lot of penciled shading to it. And yes, those color overlays and whatnot. Oh yeah, I always remember this shot, especially. Tycho's just giving himself up like that. I always found that hilarious. But anywho, the beauty of this series though is that it goes through a lot of different manias. As you can see, yeah, he's kind of the bad boy here. Like for instance, you deal with Hosk, basically this deranged imperial leader. Gee, that sounds original, but you'd be surprised how often that happens in this series. The introduction of these interdictors and what these kind of Star Destroyers do, basically warping or shutting down hyperspace travel, very on point. A very fitting kind of conclusion to this story, very on point in that light. But you're pretty much seeing an artist that really is synonymous with this series, John Nadaeu. As you can kind of look at the art here, it almost reminds you of like a Rob Liefeld or a J. Scott Campbell kind of look to it, even a Scott Lobdell. But man, it's just strong art throughout, and you're getting all kinds of stories, like stories in like a virtual world and simulations and all that jazz. It was always very intriguing because it kept expanding on like Star Wars, like how do things happen? Like, if you ever wondered, can pilots eject out of starfighters? Yeah, you actually see how that happens. But very detailed work overall. Just a lot of like nuanced ways of expanding the Star Wars world. Oh yeah, these two. Like I mentioned, Leonia Tavira, she's like this little sadist. Man, she is very cruel. She looks like a mouse, but man, she is evil. And her little lackey here, Haran. Actually, sorry, this guy's actually somewhat related to one of my favorite characters, Plur. I'll let you guys read it to fully see what happens there. But man, this series, like I said, it's even though it's Star Wars, you rarely ever see it like truly presented in a war type fashion where there's wins, there's losses, there's heavy losses, some pretty graphic imagery. So that's why I always appreciate about this series, and it even shows the light of your enemy, like the antagonist, like one of the best ones ever, Sunter Fell. He's like the noble bad guy, the bad guy that you almost wish wasn't a bad guy. Always appreciate that. But anywho, as you're seeing, just awesome ship design, awesome battle sequences. Again, John Nadaeu, amazing. And maybe just before we wrap things up, for those of you who ever played the N64 Rogue Squadron, and you ever flip through the game manual, you may remember this sequence. In the game manual, it actually had an excerpt from the Rogue Squadron series, and it actually had this part of the battle. So it was so dope that, yeah, now you get a chance to actually read the whole story, at least for those who never got a chance. But I always loved this little factoid. It's like is ingrained in my brain. Like I said, like this was my Star Wars fix for so many years. Just the Star Wars comics, novels, video games, all that good stuff. But anywho, it's not so much about me at this point. Hopefully you guys have your own opinions about the series. I kind of let the cat out the bag. Yeah, I grew up with this. I'm going to be biased. I love it. But it's, as I mentioned, it's not so much about my opinion. I wouldn't mind hearing yours in the comments down below as always. And hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Y'all folks take care.